Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an American slasher film serving as a sequel to the 1974 original of the same name. It follows a group of young adults who relocate to Harlow, Texas to renovate the neighborhood and establish their restaurant business. In doing so, they inadvertently come across the killer Leatherface. After nearly 50 years of hiding, Leatherface's way of life is turned upside down following the death of his caretaker, spurring him into a violent rampage that the friends must find a way to survive from, while his killing spree alerts the sole survivor of his previous massacre from so many decades ago. The original from 1974 is my favorite horror movie of all time, and no other movie in the franchise has been able to recapture its magic. Despite this, I remained optimistic that this one, which retcons all of the previous mediocre sequels, would at least be entertaining, and while it does somewhat succeed in this front, it still ends up being another run-of-the-mill slasher flick. None of the characters are all that interesting. The only notable one in the group is Lila, a school shooting survivor who remains traumatized by what happened to her. She easily earns the most sympathy out of everyone else in the group and doesn't come across as just another final girl. Her character isn't without problems though. She makes it clear that she is not interested in moving to Harlow with the rest of the group, which includes her sister Mel, yet she goes to the town anyway. Her trauma also doesn't have much depth behind it, as the movie makes her out to be incapable of living on her own without explaining other support systems she has besides her sister. Everyone else in the group is boring and one-dimensional. Mel, Dante, and Ruth all have zero personality and pretty much exist along with everyone else in this movie as meat for the villain to slice and dice. Beyond this, I find myself puzzled as to how they could possibly think buying and flipping a ghost town in the middle of nowhere would in any way be a good business idea. As usual, Leatherface is the main reason to watch this movie. He remains a physically intimidating presence, and with all of the lame lines that come out of characters' mouths, it's nice to have a character that manages to get the point across without having any dialogue. But with this being a continuation of the 1974 original, I'm a bit confused as to how Leatherface has managed to stay in shape in the decades leading up to this point. Despite supposedly being in his 70s or at least 60s, he seems to move faster than Usain Bolt, as he stalks his prey with an unrealistic level of agility that makes it hard to take him seriously. The movie is at its best when it's more focused on the sheer carnage that Leatherface is capable of, and man does it ever deliver. Anyone who likes a good old-fashioned gore fest with raining blood and snowing body parts won't be disappointed when they see this, as it features some of the most creative kills the series has ever seen. I don't want to give away too many of them so as to avoid spoiling the fun, but the best scene by far is when Leatherface invades a bus full of people and starts swinging his chainsaw at them with reckless abandon. It's senseless, but I can't deny that it was morbidly entertaining. I also found myself surprised at how much suspense the filmmakers were able to maintain. In some scenes, characters don't die when you think they're going to, as they spend time hiding or running from Leatherface for extended periods of time. It was great to see the movie carry some degree of tension without killing off characters right away. This being said, while the chase and kill scenes are intense, I wouldn't say that they're scary. It feels more like a violent action movie than a true horror film that's worthy of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre name. The effort put into the production design and cinematography in this regard is admirable, but it just can't pull off the same atmosphere of dread. Some of the problem falls into how the supporting characters are utilized in this movie. For example, bringing back the character of Sally Hardesty from the 1974 original was an interesting idea, but she ends up being heavily underused, reduced a little more than an inferior version of Laurie Strode from the Halloween reboots. She also contributes to a really dumb cliche which I'm honestly baffled still exists in movies today. In one scene, she's got Leatherface right where she wants him, pointing a shotgun directly at him, and yet she doesn't kill him. This isn't the only time it happens in the movie either, as characters find themselves unable to use guns when it would absolutely be in their best interest to use them. This sort of leads into one of the underlying themes the movie has regarding anti-gun measures, especially with Lila's background. Now, I do appreciate the effort in trying to tell a deeper message, as it's something that the 1974 original did as well, but in this movie's case, I don't know what it's trying to say. Lila is supposed to be terrified of using guns due to nearly being killed by one, yet she has no qualms about using one later on simply because the plot demands it. There's a missed opportunity the movie could have used to explore the consequences of gun violence and reliving trauma, and as a result, it remains muddled and confused in its approach. There's a similar problem with how it addresses things like racism and social media, both of which are examined only at surface level. Again, I like like that the movie tries to be more than just a slasher, but its themes are never examined at any meaningful level, so they may as well not have even been there. One detail of the movie that I did like was how the filmmakers brought back John Larroquette to narrate the opening. He perfectly sets up expectations for the movie's events, while doing so in a creative way that harkens back to the previous massacre that Leatherface committed. And as I hinted at earlier, for all the faults this movie has with its story, its aesthetic presentation, while not on par with the original, is still pretty spot on. The soundtrack is the best element of all, as it uses the right musical stings when a scene calls for it, effectively communicating the terror of Leatherface and fear of his victims. The movie ends on a standard predictable note, clearly highlighting the desire to make yet another sequel, which I find hilarious considering that this was meant to retcon the previous sequel, Texas Chainsaw 3D, which itself was a retcon of the other sequels. Personally, after seeing Leatherface's story being told and retold time and time again, I'd rather a new slasher be made than continue to see one tired sequel and reboot after another. Overall, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the latest in a long line of other disappointing movies in the series that can't hold a candle to the original, but as pure entertainment goes, it does succeed to a certain extent. If you enjoy slasher movies, especially the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you go into this one with low expectations, you might find yourself entertained enough with its crazy violence. I wasn't expecting too much out of the sequel in the first place, which is probably why I didn't hate it as much as others seem to. It definitely needs more work in the way of characterization and proper handling of its themes, but when it's all said and done, it still manages to be a bloody good time. What did you think about this movie? Do you think it's a worthy sequel to the original, or were you put off by its cliches and characters? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Italian fantasy film, Don't Kill Me. Bye bye!